got a bit glitchy in the middle there, but it sort of worked out in the end.
Do you think that there's ever been a line used in a TV show or in a movie which has really summed up what you've watched more aptly than that line? Hello everybody, welcome back to the channel. My name's Kevin, I'm a geek. You are watching Kevin the Geek, and welcome back to another deep dive into the history of Doctor Who as I continue reviewing all of the episodes of new Doctor Who. I've worked my way all the way through from when it first revived back with Rose, and I'm currently up to this episode, which is the Christmas special, which aired in 2011, so 13 years ago. And it was the one that came in between series 6 and 7. This is an episode which I don't have great memories of. And I think I've literally watched it the one time, literally the year that it came out. And yeah, it is an episode that I think is a little bit misunderstood, having rewatched it just now.
It's hardly my fault.
Now, apparently, this episode was ranked and reviewed in an episode of Doctor Who magazine in 2023, and it was voted by readers as being the least favourite episode featuring the 11th Doctor, which apparently beat out the previous loser, which was The Rings of Akhaten. An episode I actually really liked. So it'll be interesting when I do my review of that at some point next year when I get round to it. I always liked that episode. This one, I didn't really ever think that much of it. And I watched it just now, and it surprised me in a way that I think a lot of these reviews that I've done so far have surprised me when I come to review them, because I either don't think that they're as bad as I thought, or they were much, much, much worse than I remembered. But that line that I used in the cold open, that sums up this episode so much. And I remember when this episode got announced, I was very, very intrigued and really looked forward to it, because I was a humongous fan. I mean, I still am a humongous fan of the Narnia series, and I've read all of the 7 books, and I love them to death. I've read them front to back, cover to cover. I've read them in publication order. I've read them in chronological order. I've done so much with them. Maybe I'll need to do some stuff with them. And to be honest, it's definitely something that I should really watch the movies. I don't know what it was. I think in a way, maybe it came from the Harry Potter series, and how I always felt a little bit underwhelmed with the movies compared to the books. I love the Harry Potter books, but the movies, maybe not the first couple, but definitely I'd say, definitely Goblet of Fire onwards, I was just left that little bit flat with them. It didn't feel like it had the magic. And this is something that I feel very similar about with this episode. I don't think it truly captured the magic of Narnia. When I think back to the Narnia books, particularly The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, which of course this is a very deliberate sort of homage to, in the same way that The Christmas Carol was when the Doctor was with Catherine Jenkins and of course Michael Gambon. So I think it just left me wondering how they're going to do it. Are they going to bring in talking animals? Are they going to bring in fairies? Are they going to bring in the witch? Are they going to bring in this, that and the other? And the magic of it just wasn't there for me. I will say that I didn't want it to be like a direct rip-off or anything of The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, because you can kind of do that to an extent with The Christmas Carol and just do the same story but a Doctor Who twist on it. This one, you did have to make it different, which they did, but it just felt very underwhelming, a lot of it. And I'll try and get into it. Now, what I did find out in looking up to this, Claire Skinner, who of course plays Madge in this, who of course I'm now most familiar with playing Mum in Outnumbered, she wasn't the first choice for this episode. It was actually Miranda Hart. Now, up to this point, I believe that Miranda Hart had only really been known for her comedy stuff. For example, obviously she's been in Not Going Out, which again I've been watching. She was in, well, she had her own show, Miranda, which I never actually watched. I don't know why, I just didn't. But she was originally going to be here in this episode as Madge, but the BBC apparently vetoed it because she was then apparently cast, or maybe she was cast just before, to be a character in Call the Midwife, which again, something I've never seen. But they didn't want Doctor Who to be her first dramatic role. They wanted it to be Called the Midwife. Now, I don't know if any of you have seen Called the Midwife. You can let me know if you think she was good in that as a dramatic actress or not. If I think about this story and I think about Miranda Hart, she's not someone who I can envisage doing the role that this story intended. And again, that's probably come from mostly what I've seen her in Not Going Out. You know, you may think differently if you've seen other stuff that she's been in, and especially if you've seen Called the Midwife. But in this, it just doesn't feel like it would have been the right role for her. And if I'd been a casting director, it's not something that would have sprung to my mind thinking, this is who we want. Claire Skinner, on the other hand, at the time that she would have done this episode, I think she would have been around about Series 3, Series 4 of Outnumbered. So, to play a mum, she's had a lot of experience in that. And I absolutely believed everything that she was doing with that. Particularly the brilliant little bit with the dialogue where she's with the forestry people, obviously one of whom was Bill Bailey. And when she pulls the gun out on them, that line was just fantastic.
But there's nothing you could say that would convince me you'd ever use that gun.
Oh, really? Well, I'm looking for my children.
Now, speaking of Bill Bailey, again, this is another example where I feel it was very underwhelming. You had the three kind of rangers, the forest rangers. So you had Paul Baisley playing Vengar. For him, I most know him from being in Benidorm, which of course I've been watching. He plays Troy in Benidorm. And then of course, you've got aforementioned Bill Bailey, who plays Droxil. Sorry, I have to think about that. Droxil. And then you had Arabella Weir, who played Billis. Arabella Weir, she, from what I've seen when researching this, she's probably a bit more well known, more in line with Bill Bailey. And a lot of the criticism came from how her and Bill Bailey felt very underutilized for their respective star power for this episode. And I can't really say too much with Arabella Weir. I mean, to be fair, to be granted, she probably had more to do than either Paul or Bill did. But Bill Bailey in particular, again, I've read little quotes that he's left about the role that he did in this. And he was saying things like, I'd rather do this, playing a human character, rather than, say, an ood, because I have the chance to be more funny playing a human character rather than, say, an ood. Which, first of all, I love the fact that he knows the ood. It shows that he is quite a big fan of the show. But in reality, I didn't feel the comedy from Bill Bailey. And again, this is, from seeing him, I've done like the first series of Black Books on the channel, so I've really been watching him in that, and he is absolutely hilarious in the role that he plays in Black Books as Manny. But in this, I don't think they really gave him the opportunity to be funny. And that is a really sad thing for me. I am, of course, a little bit later on, I am going to do my ranking of this episode by giving it its usual scores and grading for that. So make sure you stay at the end. But the hardest thing with those that I have to do, of course, one of those scores is the villain, which in this, it's a difficult category for some episodes because they're not really villainous in this one. The tree people of this episode, they're not villainous. They're just trapped people or trapped tree people, and they want to escape being killed effectively. But for the purposes of this, I'd have to maybe mark them as the villains, and I'm going to try my best to do this episode as fairly as I do and hold it up to the same standards that I do with all of my other episodes, regardless of the fact that this is a Christmas episode. Because I think a Christmas episode, in its very nature, when you think about when it gets aired, especially on Christmas Day, usually we're talking anywhere about 6, 7 o'clock on Christmas Day that these Doctor Who episodes will normally get aired. And you're at the point where most people who are watching this are going to be the families. They'll have done all the presents in the morning. They've had a big, massive Christmas dinner all day. Maybe play some games and stuff. And you get into that point where you are so tired. You absolutely just feel like, I want to go for a nap right now. And so as an episode, you do want it to be a little bit lighter, a little bit easier to follow. You don't want anything too overly complicated. And at times I did feel that this episode did get a little bit overly complicated.
So, you've got an escape plan. Why aren't you escaping?
The child is weak.
You mean he's a child?
No, he is weak.
Especially the ending. Right. I'm going so forward to the end. Let's go back to the beginning a little bit. Let's talk about the Doctor for a second. Matt Smith, great.
I know.
I loved what he did in this. He was his usual bubbly, egocentric, not egocentric, but eccentric kind of character that he is. And I loved how he worked with the kids. Matt Smith in particular, his Doctor, is so good with kids. It's just a shame that, I'll say, not so much Lily, but the character of Cyril wasn't the best. And again, when it comes to child actors, I try and give them a little bit of slack because they're kids at the end of the day. They're not, well trained performers in a lot of cases. Cyril, as harsh as it's going to sound for this being a probably 8, 9-year-old kid, he was very bland as a character. Lily, I think she gave a little bit more of a performance too, and that makes sense with her being a little bit older. Although, just on the character of Lily for a moment, I will say that I think it was a huge mistake to change the original intended name, because that character was originally going to be called Lucy, which for me would have just been a much more on-the-nose nod to The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, because one of the kids, was called Lucy. But apparently the BBC, they were like, well, we don't want it to be too on the nose. I'm like, well, you kind of are doing that already. You might as well lean into it. And they sort of did it with the mansion. I think the guy owning it was supposed to be like Mr. Digby or something. Which again, if you know of the character of the Professor, the one who owns the mansions in The Lion, the Witch and the Wardrobe, which is where, of course, you find the titular wardrobe, he is Diggory Kirk. So again, I think Mr. Diggory, again, maybe that's what they were doing, okay? It could have been Mr. Diggory, and then they changed it. I'm like, oh, actually, no, we don't want it to be, again, too on the nose. That one I wasn't able to find anything out about, but yeah, I do think it was a mistake. Not to just lean in on it that little bit more much so. But yeah, when the Doctor's shown around and everything, I thought that was absolutely hilarious. Just the bonkers, fast-paced nature of it. The rest of the episode, it slowed down quite substantially, and I think that pacing, it wasn't quite to the balance of what I would personally like to see with it. I think I would have liked a better ebb and flow with the pace, where it was just like really slow, and it would just sort of bring it up a little bit. There wasn't that ebb and peak that I like to see when it comes to pacing. The whole introduction, you had the cold open where the Doctor's on a spaceship, he falls to Earth, he tries to get his spacesuit on. First of all, I will say that is an episode I really wish we'd seen. I don't know what it was, but there was something about that. I was just like, I want to know what's happening before we even get to that cold open bit. I want to see what is causing the crash, who the enemies are, what the hell's going on. But that is the way with Doctor Who. Of course, he crash lands, and at first I was thinking, why is Madge not running away scared? You know, this whole thing falling out of the sky, crashing with a humongous bang. I was thinking, this is wartime, and then I realised that was me misremembering, and it's not until later that they end up going to war. And they, of course, use Alexander Arnold. So, no, Alexander Armstrong. My apologies there. They use him as Reg, as the husband, which, again, to an extent, I think he was a little bit wasted, for how little he was in this. I think, he's such a good performer that he deserved a little bit more screen time, in my personal opinion. But the Doctor and Madge had a great little dynamic, particularly in that opening setup where he's got the spacesuit on backwards and he walks into the lamp post and things. And I did like the gag that they opened up the police box and it turned out to not be the TARDIS but an actual police box. I liked that was a nice little touch.
Ow! Wrong one! Do you think we could try again?
Because I think the police box as a TARDIS has become so iconic, with it being the Doctor Who spaceship. Sorry, I didn't say that. The Doctor's spaceship, not the Doctor Who's spaceship. I'm going to get criticised in the comments for that, I know it. But yeah, I think it's become such an iconic thing that in reality, most people either aren't aware or have forgotten that it was an actual thing. It was an actual thing to, call the police in times of need and to, do a citizen's arrest and put someone in there till the police can arrive, and things like that. So that was a nice little touch. And I loved as well the nod that the TARDIS was the wardrobe, which feels perfect in everything that we've done, particularly with the 11th Doctor's era. Because everything that they've done with Amy, for example, is all about this being mystical and magical and fairy tale-like. And they didn't quite lean onto it by bringing the kids into the TARDIS or bringing Madge into the TARDIS. So that, I think, was a little bit of a wasted opportunity. And then, yeah, we obviously go through the episode. The special effects, I'm just going to quickly say, in my opinion, for the point that we're in with this show, were dreadful. They were so bad in this one. I can forgive special effects to a certain degree when it comes to TV shows, because often they don't have the huge budgets that you get with with big blockbuster movies and things. But we're not in series 1 of Doctor Who anymore. We're in season 6. We're going big in America. You'd like to think that the money is going to be there to make them look relatively decent. Yeah, there was just a few times I was like, that is so bad. So bad. And I don't want to criticise it too much, but I have to, as me doing these reviews. Now let's talk about the ending. So of course you have the big tree people. Again, I like that there was a little nod to the second episode of New Who, which was the end of the world, where of course you had the character of Cheam character, who sadly burnt alive in that episode. But yeah, I thought that was a nice little nod, because I think that's just the kind of thing that people can forget about. I mean, at this point, we're talking 6 years later. Now, if you're talking about it now, we're almost talking 20 years later. So, yeah, I think it's nice putting these little nods. There was a big, huge nod to the Caves of Androzani, which, of course, is a classical serial, which I know is a regeneration story that I have not seen. But I know of it, so again, I like that there's a nod back to classic Who. It's just nice to do that for the long-term fans. It doesn't mean too much if you're watching it and you don't know what it means, but it's a nice touch for those who may not know what it is. But the villains, they were, well, pun not intended in this one, but they were very wooden. I didn't think too much about them. The way that they spoke with the speaking through the characters, it was a bit, But again, they weren't really villainous, but they didn't do much either. They were just sort of there. They just sat there, or they stood up and they gave you a crown, and then you go, "Oh, I'm now going to tap my hand on your shoulder so I can speak to you." It was like there wasn't a lot to it. I just want to go back to the supporting characters, the Bill Bailey characters, the Tree Foresters. I loved their spacesuits. Spacesuits were fantastic, and even the Doctors to a certain extent, because I think we've got so used to seeing that sort of orange spacesuit, which I think it was first introduced in The Impossible Planet and the Satan Pit. I could be wrong there. Someone correct me if I'm wrong with that one. But yeah, we've got so used to seeing the Doctor in that specific spacesuit, which does come back. This one, I don't think we ever get to see again. I think it's the first time we ever get this one. And I've heard that there was an issue, something to do with Matt Smith's hair. So I don't know if that is potentially the reason why they maybe go with a different spacesuit for the Doctor in this one. Again, someone let me know if they know a little bit more on that one. But the ending.
Matt! What am I doing here?
It's Christmas Day, my love. Where else would you be?
Christmas Day.
It was good. It was good. It was highly emotional. I cried watching it today, which is not something I expected coming into this. I always thought, oh, it's very cheesy. And I think it kind of stems similar to Closing Time, the episode I did about 2 weeks ago, the one with James Corden. But they were very on the nose with this one. It's about mothers and motherly love and women being stronger than men and the whole thing about the mothership. It was very on the nose with that. I didn't mind it. I read some people really take a big exception to that. I didn't mind it. But the way that the episode was framed, the way that Madge thought that Reg had been killed in action, his plane had been shot down or whatever, or he got lost, and the way that she kept holding on to the telegram where she was informed that he was dead, or presumed dead at the very least, the way that she was refusing to tell her kids because she didn't want Christmas to be defined by the loss of their father, the way that it was all the way built up, when they got to that bit where they started showing Madge the images of Reg in his plane, it began to choke me up. It really did. Then you have that moment where she's let slip to the kids that their father's dead, and she begins to tell them. Then they get brought outside by the Doctor to reveal, oh no, actually, he is alive all along. Some people will see that as being overly sentimental. Is there anything wrong with that? It's Christmas, for Christ's sake. I mean, it always feels, when it comes to Christmas and TV, you've got one of two directions. You either go with something like EastEnders, which is notorious for having someone be murdered or raped, or something absolutely dreadful will always guaranteed happen on Christmas Day, which, I'm not going to lie, is true to life, because as much as we would all love Christmas to be fun and lovely and magical, it's not going to be. people are still going to be hurt. People are going to have arguments. People are going to have falling outs. People are going to get murdered.
This is going to be the best Christmas Wolford's ever had. Have you finished?
But when I'm watching something for Christmas, I don't want to feel, down and think about the horrible stuff. I just want to be nice and happy. And so for me and my personal taste, I love the fact that Madge managed to somehow save Reg through sciencey, wincy, wibbly wobbly, timey wimey stuff, which I'll just quickly say on that. They leaned very heavily into that. We've always had the whole timey-wimey thing with the Doctor, but I think in this one we had like humany-woomany and sciencey, wincy and a few others, I think, which I was just like, maybe going a little bit too far with that Moffat. But yeah, personally, I cried a lot. I loved this episode. I won't say it is great. As a Christmas episode, as something to make me feel warm and cuddly inside, I loved it. As a Doctor Who episode, there's a lot of issues. So, like I said, I'm going to do my rankings now. So I give 10 category score out of 10, which gives an overall score out of 100. I am going to try and judge this, as I said, as equally as I can to any other episode. I'm not going to give it bonus points for it being a Christmas episode and making me feel warm for the. If I have an issue with something, I'm going to have an issue with it, and I would have had an issue with it regardless of whether it's Christmas or not. So, these are my scores for the Doctor, the Widow, and the Wardrobe. And so, The Doctor, the Widow and the Wardrobe, the 2011 Christmas special, has scored 64 marks out of 100, which gives it a C+ grading. It is, it's not the lowest episode that I've given a score to with the 11th Doctor. There's definitely a few that have scored lower. It's not even the lowest scoring Christmas episode that I've done so far. I think it's the third lowest out of the 7 that I've now done. So it's almost midway. As a Christmas episode, I liked it. I thought it was good. As a Doctor Who episode, yeah, there was a lot to kind of be desired with this one. One thing that did bug me, and it's a stupid thing. In the credits, Amy and Rory were listed higher than everyone else, which I don't agree with. They came in for a cameo at the end of the episode, which was a nice touch, and it definitely felt that it fit with the themes of the episode and the Doctor being sort of alone and not wanting to be alone at Christmas, which was, again, a nice sentimental touch. But it was something that kind of felt tacked on. And there was always that wonderment. Are we going to bring Amy and Rory back? Or are we going to sort of finish them off at the end of Series 6? So it feels like it was quite a late edition. And ultimately, the reason that I think they weren't in it a lot more was because Arthur Darvill was performing in a play or something. So he wasn't really available for filming purposes. What I am going to be interested to know, because obviously next week I'm going to do the Asylum of the Daleks, which, after rewatching this, remembering how that episode starts, it makes me wonder how much time has elapsed between the ending of this episode, where we see the Doctor, Amy and Rory, and them sitting down for Christmas dinner, and them always setting out a place for the Doctor, to getting to the point at the start of Asylum of the Daleks, where Amy and Rory have broken up, and they're not even on speaking terms. So I'm going to see if I can find any information about that one. But that is going to be a really interesting one, because we're getting into the final time with Amy and Rory, and it'll be interesting if there's stuff that I can pick up on. But yeah, join me next time for Asylum of the Daleks. Join me next time for any of my reactions that I do on the channel. If you want early access, then you can consider joining the Patreon. And of course, if you are new, please consider subscribing, turning on notifications, dropping your comments down below. But that is going to do it for now. There will be another Christmas episode of Doctor Who before we get into my Christmas month, which will be right at the end of November, where I will review The Snowmen. That's when Doctor Who will take then a pause until in the new year, when I'll carry on with the time when we bring Clara into the equation. I will be doing a reaction for this year's Christmas special. I did a reaction to the 60th Doctor Who specials last year, and the Church on Ruby Road Christmas special with Ncuti Gatwa, and all of the first series with him and Ruby Sunday. So yeah, if you want to check any of them out, there's playlists. If you look in the video description, there's links to the various playlists, or there's even a document that I have which shows reactions that I've done, and provides, again, links and stuff to find them, to make it a little bit easy for you guys to find anything that I do on the channel. But that's going to do it for today. Thank you so very much. This was a longer review than I envisaged I would do. I thought this would be like 10 minutes long. It's close to 30 now, so yeah, I appreciate you if you've stuck with me to this point through my incoherent ramblings. But for now, my name's Kevin. I am a geek, and you've been watching Kevin the Geek. Goodbye.